Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. Let's start with roll call. Miriam Plunder here. Megan Richards.
Nancy Frere.
Judy Murphy.
Yogi Zimmerman.
Nona Chariello.
And I hear Teresa's car, so we'll make a question mark. All right, oral communications. Does anybody have anything that is not on the agenda? No? Then let's move on to approval of minutes. Did everybody have a chance to read them? You did not? Okay, you will not be publicly shamed. Do I have an approval to? What do I have? Oh, there is Teresa. Okay. Okay. All in favor? Aye. So approved. Okay. Okay. You weren't there last time? Oh, that's okay. Oh, yeah, okay, okay, okay. Yeah. So committee business. So let's start with the town picnic and thank everybody who was manning and who was preparing for the highly successful event, I think. The one thing which was really hard for you, for the ones of you who weren't there, the music, we had to compete with the music. So we'll talk over the year that maybe we find a solution because we were screaming. But other than that, it was, I think it was a success. We had quite a number of people. 3 of my neighbors have cleared their detrichia. 2 of them came and were looking at the plant. So it shows that, personal contact helps. And I think it was a good turnout. I had the feeling it was a successful event. So it was certainly worth our time. And I want to single out Nona. Nona spent, I don't know how many hours in cleaning up our banner, which is now squeaky clean and has beautiful, what do you call those? Grommets. So now we can hang it up. And the picture, if you saw your email, the picture is, it's hanging in the picture beautifully. So thank you.
Well,
You need to-
2 things. One, thanks to Rebecca, who asked the band to turn themselves down because it was unbelievable before she accomplished that. And the other was, I think that when we laid out the table, we did it sort of strategically, what's here, what's there. And it made sense. But I think in watching people, most people look at the plants and sort of secondarily at the other thing. And I wonder whether we shouldn't either get another table or something so that the plants can be front and center, because that seems to draw the eye and the conversation more than any other single thing.
That's a good point. And in spring, remember there's this famous photo, which is full of plants, but that was at a different time of the year. But we can certainly put that's true. There wasn't much interest in the plant.
Yeah, the only problem is that it was too sunny in front of the table and they were all,
Oh, I see.
I mean, it was just hot and sunny. So we moved them back so that they'd be in a little bit of shade.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
Okay.
definitely.
No, that's a good point. Okay. Anything on the picnic? Then I'll move on. You received, I think it was today, my email with the tree reports, and I attached the final site visit template. And please get rid of your existing and in future use this one so that everybody uses the same template, because we want to be as objective as possible and as whatever you call it, homogeneous or whatever. So
You actually have that that here. You're talking about the tree permit?
no,
No, you're talking about the
site
site
permit.
review. So you have that as Appendix C in the agenda packet. That's not it. It's the wrong one.
I didn't, no, there is no site review. Is there?
Yep.
Oh, that's,
Conservation. You
Really?
have it labeled conservation.
oh, okay. Oh, that's right. I did it at the end. That's the same one. Okay,
Right.
that's the same one.
So
It has the date,
yeah.
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 the
I
one
have a-
with the date.
I have a suggestion, and that is that I think, well, it's later in the agenda, so should we do it?
Yeah, we'll do
in
it
the
later in the
agenda?
agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another committee update. We are at committee business. Under site reviews, under site reviews.
Yeah.
And then Eliza, I reached out to the town clerk to have Eliza added to the website, and that will happen. It just takes some time. She is already on our paperwork. And
But she's not here tonight, and
uh,
so,
no, she can't because of the time difference. She might be able at the 5:30 one, but this
Ah.
is way too late. This is 10 o'clock, and she is what is she, a 16-year-old?
okay, so she's away, basically.
Yeah, she's
and-
away. She's in boarding school. But she is very responsive. She wrote the article. So I'm not worried. And then the last point under committee business, I wanted to give you an update that yesterday, the wildfire committee had their meeting, and Jennifer Hammer has resigned as chair, and MJ Lee is the new chair. And MJ is going to change the meeting time to Mondays at 10, and it will be either the first Monday or the second Monday, and that will be voted in next month. I cannot do Mondays at 10, so Nona is going to take over in November and will be the designated Conservation Committee member of the Wildfire Committee.
9 or 10?
9. They said they will vote next month. That's what it says. But I think it's a given. That's what MJ wants, and I can't Mondays I could have done 10. That's why I said 10. Sorry. So anyway, do we have to have a motion? Does it have to be formal that Nona is taking over? But just can I have a motion? Let's just do one. So that's.
Well, it's not a liaison where we sort of.
No, it's a
approve
member. Yeah.
actual member
Yeah,
of
we're
their
switching.
committee, so they do the motions, not us.
Okay, fine. So we will just tell them that she is taking over. Perfect. No, it's a member.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And the charter of the Wildfire Preparedness Committee says one member of the Conservation Committee has to be on that. So we're just changing the name. Yeah, she will do that. I'm sure she will. Okay. So let's go to old business. Wildfire corridors, the update on the
Wait,
fence. warden-
You skipped A?
Yeah, I skipped it because it's deferred. There's no update.
Okay.
Nona, do you want to take over? Megan, do you want to take over?
I would like to try sharing the document again. I know this didn't work last time. The problem is that I keep trying to fix it, but I can only test it here because it works perfectly at home. So I'm going to try and share it again. If it doesn't work, I will bail quickly, I promise. Let's see.
This is promising. Very good.
Yay!
Oh, that is fantastic.
We did it. Okay, so maybe I will do any edits in real time. If you three, Judy, Megan, and Marianne would sort of lead the discussion, then I can focus on making this work.
I can start it off anyway.
Yeah.
So coming out of last month's meeting, some of the feedback we received was that it was not entirely clear where the requirements particularly horse fences were discussed, where the requirements regarding clearance from the ground and height would apply on a property. We talked ourselves in some circles, again, as we usually do on this ordinance, and decided that it would be clearer to change our approach so that instead of adding a new type of fence called a wildlife friendly fence, we are acknowledging that horse fences and domestic fences can be wildlife friendly if they meet certain criteria. So rather than adding another fence type, we have indicated where on a property fences would be required to be wildlife friendly. Another item that we found, or that was brought up during the last meeting, was that double fencing was included in the ordinance as something that is allowed in certain conditions, and we have removed double fencing entirely. So that's the first strike through on fence location. Double fencing is not permitted. And we'll get down to a definition of that later. So when it comes to fence height, we have only removed one item, which is the 4-foot requirement in side yards along streets, because that item is taken care of in the next row, which is wildlife friendly. So again, instead of adding a new type of fencing, we're saying where wildlife friendly fences are required. In districts smaller than 1 acre, wildlife friendly fences are recommended, but they're not required. In the 1 acre to 2 acre districts, which is what we had discussed last time, this is the same recommendation that we had previously, which is that within 10 feet of property lines in rear and side yards, fences should be wildlife friendly. We're only saying rear and side yards because front yards already have a much larger setback for domestic fences. And in properties larger than 2 acres, because of the tangle of not including a third fence type, and we're not modifying the definition of a horse fence to require clearance, we are now saying that in order to maintain wildlife corridors within districts larger than 2 acres, that fences within 20 feet of property lines should be wildlife friendly. So the rest of the document, those edits are the summary that carry through definition throughout the rest of the document. Maybe I'll pause there.
I'll just add one thing, which is for folks who've looked at previous versions of this, this is version 4, and we have changed all additions to green from red and then blue, and all the strikeouts are the original text.
I think that's just editing from the software. It probably has a suggestion about our grammar. So another item that we talked about last month, now you want to scroll to the next page. We talked about exceptions, that in cases where there's an existing property and you're rebuilding a fence, should you be required to suddenly move the fence or significantly change it in a way that would impact the way that you have been using your property or the way that your property functions. No, well, I'm talking about the item at the bottom of the page, but yeah, that's a good spot. So we did not make a change that specifically addresses grandfathering in existing fences because we felt that it was covered by the permits and ASCC review and the repairs or replacements clauses together. We did modify, or we kept our one exception that we'd added previously, which is that if they're, for oddly shaped properties, some long, narrow properties, that setback may not make sense on all sides. If there is a way that a homeowner proposes to provide equal or greater permeability to wildlife, that would be subject for review as well.
Can you explain the grandfather issue one more time for me?
Yeah, so I'll use my own property. I think a number of us have discussed our own fences. If you have lived somewhere for a while and you've built a fence according to our current ordinances, and it's in need of repair, the ordinance already requires that you have to basically bring your fence up to the current ordinance requirements. So with our additions, that would potentially require people with older fences, 6-foot fences on the property line, to pull them back or to make them shorter.
Even just for repairs, not just
Or-
replacement.
Well, so the clause is, when a portion of a fence exceeding 25% of the total length of fencing within required yards is damaged or removed and replaced, then it
Yeah.
has to conform.
Yeah, Megan, in addition to that, the one thing we decided in the last meeting, that when we are at the ASCC, we will bring the grandfathering to the ASCC. They might have additional input. So we'll pull in the ASCC for that. Just to clarify.
Well, we also discussed that in general, the grandfathering issue comes up around many different things in town. So the town sort of has a way, a generalized way, a standardized way of dealing with when things are grandfathered, when they're not. What does it mean? Who does it apply to? That kind of thing. So for us to try to write a section that encompassed all those variables, and we just figured we were entering deep weeds and we couldn't do it right.
Well, it's probably outside. It's probably outside of our mission.
That's why I wanted you to push up to the first piece. It's not just, oh, it's outside. We didn't change. Yes. No, in that section. That's, yeah, how do you want to do it?
I'm just asking when you're going to want comments, and I'm perfectly happy to hold until you go through all of your suggested changes from the last meeting. But I have a number of comments I'd like to make.
As you are typing, should we have the comments right away? What do you think?
Yeah, I was just scrolling through on my screen. I think that we've covered all the points that we
We have,
changed.
okay, okay.
Okay, so I want to start off with the 10-foot setbacks again. And I'm sitting here shaking. That may be still. On a 1-acre parcel that is perfectly square, what we're talking about with a 10-foot setback all the way around the 3 sides, not including the front, which we already understand that no one's changing that, no one's arguing about that. We're talking about approximately 5,600 square feet of property that is now being sacrificed all the way around the property, or approximately 12.9% of the property to satisfy the 10-foot setback. If we're talking a property that's, let's just say, a little differently shaped, and we didn't go through all of the different iterations, but let's say you have a irregularly shaped, but still fairly linear in certain aspects property. Of that 1-acre parcel, if you require the 10-foot setbacks we're talking about, you're now saying that it's going to be 20% of that property, which is now being required for a wildlife corridor, 10-foot setbacks on the fencing, et cetera. This is pretty substantial. And I do not disagree with the importance of emphasizing maintenance of wildlife corridors and sensitivity to the maintenance of wildlife corridors. But I also have a concern that we're targeting one subset of the general population of Portola Valley, which actually probably is the largest. I'm assuming the 1 acre to, what is it, 1 to 2 acres. That's probably the majority of properties within our community. I don't know, but I would assume that it is. But when you're starting to tell somebody, you've got to give up 20% of your property for wildlife corridors. Now, I understand there are exceptions, there's this, there's that, but that's what we're talking about here. I am very concerned that we are making these blanket changes and we really haven't had a lot of community involvement or awareness. It doesn't matter that, I think we did have that one meeting and that was, right, that was about wildlife corridors. But it wasn't well publicized. It was not well attended and people didn't really understand what we're talking about. So I personally feel that we do have an obligation to our community to make sure that they understand what we as a committee are proposing here with respect to 10-foot setbacks. And if I'm understanding this correctly, we're saying that if you put a fence 10 feet within your property from the property line, 10 feet in, we're still saying, if I read this right, which I may not have, that that fence has to be 4 feet high, it has to have this, it has to have that. And it's like, you can't have it both ways to me. To me, it's an either or situation. I find this to be excessive. I happened to have to go over to Woodside twice in the last few days. And both times I ended up going down Mountain Home Road. And I looked carefully the entire way while I was driving, which is kind of a stupid thing to do, but I admit this, to see what is the actual fencing in that community. And I never saw anywhere where there was horse fencing that was 16 inches off the ground. By the way, I went home and measured mine, and it varies from 4 inches to maybe 10. And I think that's the norm. My corrals, I went home and measured my corrals after our last meeting. I told the committee I would do just to kind of have an understanding. So I'm very troubled by this. I remain very troubled by it. I appreciate the importance of emphasizing the need to try to keep our community as open as we can. But I don't feel comfortable that we are now saying we're the homeowners association for Portola Valley and we're going to require this, that, and the other, and these are our recommendations. I appreciate there's been some attempt to hear what I was concerned with in our last meeting, and I thank you. Seriously, sincerely, I thank you for clearly working to find a solution. I don't believe we're there.
Well, thank you. Other comments? Let's go now through the comments. We're ready for the comments, does it seem to be? Or as we have started the comment section. Any other comments?
Yeah, let's just go
So we did try and address what we thought were the concerns that, well, actually, should I stop sharing? Would it be better to have this on there or should I do?
Were you not going to go through all the changes?
Well, there may be a misunderstanding and maybe I misheard. So the 10-foot setback applies to anything that is not wildlife friendly. And so if you obey the setback, then you can have your 6-foot fence. So the setback only requires that the fence be wildlife friendly in that area. Once you get in 10 feet, 6 feet is fine. I don't know if that, and you can have the 4-foot fence on the property line still if it's wildlife friendly. So that maybe is, maybe we didn't nail it in terms of clarifying that point. But I think I heard you say something slightly different. That's all. We're just trying to meet everybody's.
Yeah, we're
needs
trying to meet,
and-
yeah. And I understand, I hear Teresa. I think we can either go through everybody or we can continue with the definition, but I don't want to go into a discussion right now with you. Okay, yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So my question was, does at this time, anybody else in the committee have, like Teresa, a real concern about what you have heard so far?
Yeah, what I still struggle with is how that will be enforced and how this whole transition can take place. And without having clear understanding how the town would enforce it, I'm also a little bit for Teresa because it's something on paper that's just on paper.
Actually, there is an answer to enforcement. Can we put enforcement on the side? Let's just talk about definitions and changes, but there is an answer which will make you happy, but I don't want to go into these otherwise. So is that all you had? So anything else coming this way? Nancy?
So, I am concerned that we are changing something pretty significant. And if what Teresa said was true, that there hasn't been very much community input into this, what has happened? I mean, what is driving this change that we're proposing today? Other than wanting to have wildlife be as comfortable as possible in our community, other than just making changes to encourage people to do this. I mean, could we just soften it a little bit more and make it more, I don't know, voluntary? Like I basically have talked to neighbors who are putting up fences and they were happy to just move their fence over however many feet to have a quarter. And that's what I think people have done in the past. To your point, Nona, I didn't understand what you just clarified. So I do think 10 feet all the way around seems pretty significant.
Okay, so one thing is, we had this one meeting, the public meeting, and we probably have had more outreach than the ASCC had when they did the same thing with the 2.5 acre parcels. So I think there was enough outreach, and this is going to the ASCC, and this will take a while in the ASCC. I think there will be more than one ASCC meeting. So I think we have been working on this, and I agree with Nancy. I have looked around in the 1 acre parcels, and the newer fences, they're all 4 feet. They're not higher. There is I would say, the majority of the people who lives here, who has moved here, and Nancy was saying she was talking in her environment, they are actually supporting this. But there is the new law, the room to roam law, and that triggered it all, which was roughly a year ago. And so what I would like to see, or what the subcommittee would like to see, we have spent so many hours. We have also conferred with the ASCC, and the ASCC has supported us in what we're doing. So I would like us, we have to have the conversation. Maybe we will not have a unanimous vote, but it's okay. I mean, that's why we're voting. Otherwise we wouldn't have to vote. And to answer Nancy's questions, make it voluntarily. The issue is that it's always the 1 or 3 or 2 percenters who want to have a fence in the ravine. We had this case recently in Westridge, and you can't have a fence in the ravine anywhere. And the way it's enforced is by having a fence ordinance that says you can't have a fence in a hillside that's 20% or bigger. And that's why we are working on the ordinance. So that's just, I wanted to address that quickly.
So can I say something about that?
Yes.
Also, I think it wasn't just that we decided, oh, let's look at the fence ordinance. It was triggered partly by the Room to Roam bill, which made us all sort of start thinking about this a little more, that kind of urged towns to start doing something to really be proactively protective. And it was the idea that now with all of these state laws changing about building we must do, lot splitting we must do, ministerial approval of ADUs 4 feet from the property line, that we, as our density goes up, we are at risk of losing permeability through the community for the wildlife. And that people who come in and build new, or especially if developers start arriving and building, doing an SB 9, and suddenly there are 4 units on what was once one property, and then they all put their fences out to the property line. And it's easy to see that large blocks of town could soon become impenetrable, except for the streets. Then the wildlife's on the streets, which is dangerous for us as well as them. So I think that was the major motivation, to try with an understanding that most people do it voluntarily. I mean, you move out here, because you like it, and so you want to contribute to it, but it's probably designed for those outliers who would not feel that way, who would say, you know, I just spent my $15 million, by God, and I want this 6-foot fence on the property line because I need my privacy. And if we can standardize that as a norm for the community, then it becomes more difficult for them to do it. And in terms of outreach, I would say that this has now been on our agenda for at least 4 meetings, maybe more. In between that, we had a study session devoted just to the fencing issue, nothing else. There were not a whole lot of people came, not as many as we had hoped. But I don't know of any committees who have spent more time on something and had a study session in addition. So there's kind of a limit to what a committee can do for outreach. And it's always true that when these things happen, like the housing element or whatever, it perks along, and many deal with it, and they have study sessions, and they have public meetings, and and then at the last minute, when it starts to be close to being done, people come outraged and say, nobody ever told us about this. So I think that some of that's going to be inevitable, because it's just how most of town politics works.
I've been absent the last 2 meetings, and the other 2 meetings where this was discussed, which were previous to the last 2, I was completely confused. And so I'm going to abstain on this vote and just assume that the subcommittee did their work, and I'm abstaining.
I would say that we went round and round and round with many things that aren't here, many things that got proposed, many things we heard from ASCC, and thought hard about how would it work? How would you enforce it? How would it go? Some of those things we tried to incorporate because they thought we were desirable. Some of those things we abandoned. So there's been unbelievable number of hours have gone into this, which isn't necessarily apparent when you just look at the few green sentences. And some of it is we really tried hard to simplify it, to have it be straightforward and relatively simple, not too complex, so that it would be easy to enforce, easy to understand and apply. That's all.
Could,
Yeah.
I support Teresa because I think we have not had significant town involvement. In terms of the practicality, I think with new fencing, new development is probably not too difficult. I see major problems having somebody change what's been there for 50 or 80 years.
And that's why, and we sort of, so we share the change, and that's why we said we are bringing that towards the ASCC, you know, the old fencing. I assume you're talking about old fencing, because, and as Nancy said, this is, the grandfathering is not in our. Now, from an outreach perspective, don't forget, this is going to the ASCC. You know, we are presenting this to the ASCC, and there it will get a lot of exposure. And we don't expect that this is, you know, going to overnight, going to be implemented. There will probably be some more changes. But I really think we have done our best to come up with the best solution, considered what Judy was outlining with the new bill, and with avoiding that wildlife gets pushed into Westridge and Cervantes or Alpine. And that's really, that's the end result, that there will be Alpine, Portola Road, Cervantes, Westridge, and a few more. And other than that, wildlife won't get through. And then the mountain lions will not get through. And if we have a problem with the apex predator, we will get an unsurmountable problem with the deer. So we have given this a huge amount of thought from many different angles. And so what I recommend, let's continue with the definition and see where we are at the end, and then hopefully have a vote, and everybody should vote their conscience.
So the only other thing I would say is it will go from us to ASCC. It may well, because it will affect so many people, it may well go to planning. And the final thing is the council probably. If you look at what happened to the Redwood guidelines, you know, how long it took to get those Redwood guidelines through, and how many times it circled back with changes, et cetera. This is sort of just, I was going to say this is the best start we could come up with, but in fact, it's version number 4, having tried to accommodate most of the concerns that we heard. And the one that we really weren't able to satisfy, I know that Teresa's concern is very strong and very real. And you know, we talked about it at great length, and sort of decided that we thought the 10 feet was important. There can be fences in that area. They can be on the property line. They can be 2 feet in, 5 feet in, 10 feet in. They just have to, within that space, they have to be wildlife friendly. And outside of that space, they can be anything you want. Okay.
Could I ask? something? So I have to admit, reading through this, I'm actually really confused, to be honest, because when I see under fence location under 1 acre, it says domestic fences are permitted on all property lines except the front. And then when I go down to height, it says 4 foot for horse fences, and then it says 4 foot for front and 6 foot side and rear for domestic fences. And I understand that domestic fences is defined further, not in this situation, but when I read this, I'm like, what's a domestic fence? It's not going to occur to me to really go read for definition. And then when I read the next one, domestic and horse fences required to be wildlife friendly within 10 feet of property lines inside and rear yards. Again, not really understanding what the difference is between domestic and a horse. I'm confused. And then when I go down and try to understand the definition, which I go down, way down, domestic fence is a fence that is not a horse fence. And then domestic fences are wildlife friendly if they comply with 1804-315. But it's with that statement, then I look down at wildlife friendly. Okay, you have the top rail no more than 4 feet high, but yet we're talking about domestic fences that are 6 feet tall, and then lowest wire or rail is 16 inch above ground. Okay, is that for the horse or the domestic wildlife friendly? So it's unclear to me whether domestic fence is a wildlife friendly domestic fence or a regular domestic fence.
Can I answer that before you go on to other things? A horse fence is a kind of a fence. A domestic fence is a fence located in a certain place. A domestic fence is any fence. The previous definition has been that it wasn't a horse fence. It was just a domestic fence or a horse fence. And I believe that now what we're proposing is that a domestic fence can be any kind of a fence you want as long as it's within that setback.
Yeah, but I mean, if I see in your table, it says 6 feet.
Yeah, I think
tall,
that's,
And if I go down here, it says 4 feet and wildlife friendly. I'm just unclear where the wildlife friendly portion, I mean.
so this is where, agreed, the ordinance is confusing ordinance language. So we tried to not touch the existing definitions as much as possible. So we're left with.
Inherited that stuff.
Right, we're left with domestic fence is not a horse fence. Basically, what that's saying is a horse fence is a very specific style, as Judy was saying. A domestic fence is everything else. And a domestic fence can be any height. There's even a reference to something about a 2 foot tall fence somewhere in this ordinance, I think. So up to six, right, but the definition of a domestic fence relates to the fact that it's a fence more than its location or its height, I believe. So all we're adding is a layer that says you can build a domestic fence anywhere, but if it's within this setback from the property line, it has to be 4 feet tall and it has to have clear space above the ground. So it's just adding restrictions to the design of that fence.
Well, it's not clear.
Ye-
The ordinance, and then I have to agree with Teresa about requiring one property to give up 10 feet on both sides seems a little excessive. I can kind of understand doing it on one side, but to give up both sides seems a little unfair for, for new property owners. essentially.
You don't have to give up. You can have a 4-foot fence.
Well, if
You
it's
can have a 4-foot fence.
feet, then you're really limited by what kind of landscape. You just can't have fruit trees, you can't have vegetable gardens unless you do it.
That's the whole idea. That's the whole idea that basically we can call, when I talk to ASCC, there is an easier wording, which is not in the complicated. What we basically are doing, we're saying perimeter fences are coming down to 4 feet. That's what we're saying. And, go ahead. And for the next 10 feet in, yeah. But we're talking about the ideal situation. And then when you go in the 10 feet, then you can put in your 6-foot fence. The vegetable garden, I have been looking, as you know, I run and hike. I see more and more, particularly with the new houses, with the modern houses, they put in very fancy vegetable beds, but they are high-tech and they have gates that open. So I feel pretty good from a vegetable side because you see now at the newer constructions and that people are putting them in, but they don't seem to feel the need to put in a big fence. They just put it fancy. So that is very interesting. That is new. That didn't happen 5 years ago.
And as a low-tech vegetable gardener who will not be putting in all these fancy things, I insisted on the allowance for modifications depending on where's the sunniest spot in your property. If that's within that distance from the property line, find another way to leave some wildlife habitat. Great.
And so we accommodated
And
that.
I wanted to just revisit that we did initially talk about corridors along one side or limiting them. And that hit a roadblock because then we have to know where the corridors are. If one person changes their property and cuts off that corridor and you no longer have a corridor. So it really wasn't feasible to limit it to one side. So instead we used the best available, wildlife information we could find to identify that 20-foot total of neighborly setbacks to allow for corridors that would actually be used by wildlife.
I guess what I wanted to think about is, so many of the 1 acre properties are developed. I mean, they're all developed. So, and having someone who's decided they're remodeling their whole home and whatever, when they put in this 10-foot fence, it's gonna, I think of my property, I would put in a 10-foot fence, it's just gonna hit my neighbor's 10-foot fence at the, it's gonna hit my neighbor's fence at their property, at the property bottom. So this 10-foot corridor for animals just gets, for deer to get stuck. Because there's no other animals on my property that are blocked by my 6-foot fences. Nothing. I mean, the raccoon, he ate all my grapes. I have rats coming out my ear. There are no animals except deer that are blocked from my property. So mountain lions, they have no problem jumping over. Bobcats, no problem jumping in my fence. So, I mean, I'm kind of like, we're trying to solve the problem for the deer. It's just, I mean, I almost feel like this is a change in search of a problem, because I think it's more like an idea we should be focusing on these kind of new development ideas, and a property that has no fencing, okay, we don't want them to then put in the fence, but so many properties. And even if it's half breaking down, they're gonna wanna reestablish it. I don't know, it is a tricky situation, and
But even in your environment, I looked very carefully in Central Portola Valley, in your area, and that's what I found so encouraging, that most of these fences, they're 4 feet, they're not higher than 4 feet. And if you go down Cherokee, Shawnee, and what have you. So I think we might be perceiving a problem that for the majority of the people is not a problem. There will always be deer haters, one of them. And
Well,
we
we're not
have,
talking just about deer. I don't think you're right that all these other animals can get in, the adults, but the babies can, and the young ones can't. And so then the family of all of these other kinds of things can't make their way through town. The mom can get over the fence, but then just leave the babies behind. And that's not.
yeah, but I
so
feel
that-
be some other exception, just creating, like I said, 10-foot corridor that bangs into the neighbors.
Well, and that's what we were trying to
Won't.
avoid as much
that's
as,
what we're doing. It won't.
no, it will in certain places.
Has a property, has their own
It,
neighbor.
it will, but if we had done it so that you only had to do it on one side, we would be creating more of those. And what we were trying to avoid was creating more of those.
Because then they end up on the street. Never forget, that is a real big argument.
I'd like to just offer a few comments. I think there are two kinds of feedback that we're getting. One is that it's not clear, and the other is that it doesn't work for some people. And I think I want to emphasize that the fence ordinance was really complicated even before we did anything. It took us a couple of months, actually, to even figure out what it really means. So our goal was to make it clear and more consistent, but also more educational, because we are seeing a lot of 4-foot fences going in, and that's a great thing to see, but most of them don't have 16 inches of clearance off the ground. And so defining what a wildlife friendly fence is, or what makes a fence wildlife friendly, is really important, I think, and it's an important educational part of this. I think one thing that would help, which is something that we did try to do, is to illustrate this with diagrams of what can go where and what the different fence types actually look like, so that people have a better image of what they can do and what might appeal to them.
I also say that if you take take all of our suggestions out of it and go back to the original fence regulation and try to understand that. Because a lot of the things you're bringing up are inconsistencies that are in that black lettering, and they're already there. They're not problems that we created. It's the way it's written. And we didn't feel like it was our place to wholesale throw it out and try to rewrite the fence ordinance. We were just trying to add in these wildlife corridor protections. And so we inherited a very awkward thing.
David, I see you have your hand up.
I do. As someone who has probably listened to all of the meetings on this subject, first of all, I think it's come a long way. And I find it, maybe because I've read too many fence ordinances, pretty at least as comprehensible as our current fence ordinance. So I'm all for that. I get the wildlife friendly 4 foot, 6 foot. It's pretty benign. There is a scientific definition of wildlife friendly. And I don't think we're a zoo. And if somebody wants to keep all the critters out of their yard, then they shouldn't be allowed to look at critters, maybe, because where are they going to come from? Where are they going to live? It's not just corridors, it's habitat. And I get if you want to have fruit trees, yeah, okay, great. But do you have to grow them all the way to every edge of your property? I don't know. To me, there are small properties like in Corte Madera, and for privacy reasons, yes, they get fences along the sides. There are big properties like most of the town is zoned for, like Westridge, which wouldn't notice 10 feet one way or the other. And then you've got maybe 120-ish homes in central Portola Valley, and we have an acre and a half. And I give up 10. Well, we don't like fences anyway, but 10 feet is not a huge deal. So I'm all for this. I think we need to let our wildlife thrive. And yes, lots of critters can, if desperate, get over a 6 foot fence. Like your dog could if it was desperate. But foxes and a lot of the other animals we wish we had more of are going to go somewhere else. And we're not going to have them. And we're going to have more rats, frankly, or more poison or whatever people use. So I think if we want to be a wildlife friendly community, we need habitat and we need to be really careful about it. So I'm 100% in favor. As far as public input, well, this is like the 5th meeting. It must be like 20 hours of this stuff. And it's come a long way, but it's not like anybody who cares shouldn't have had an opportunity to weigh in. So I'm a bit radical, but I have spent a couple decades photographing wildlife and have a certain amount of expertise in what it takes to have them here in a community. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Habitat is a good point. Okay, so can we now continue maybe with the definitions and go through the changes? Okay, Megan. Are we? No, we haven't finished with the definition. We have to go several more pages.
I think that we've discussed most of the definitions. Most of them just say domestic fences are wildlife friendly if they comply with, horses and fences are wildlife friendly if they comply with, or are the introductory table in complete sentences. The one that we do need to look at is the definition of wildlife friendly, which says that wildlife friendly fencing is wildlife friendly, allows wildlife to safely pass over and under it. And I think we were talking about, well, I was thinking through a couple of edits that we might need to make here now that we've included domestic fencing as domestic fencing can be wildlife friendly. So rather than saying the top wire or rail maximum of 4 feet, which was relevant for horse fences, I think we need to say height maximum 4 feet.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the second half of the sentence. I think it's, minimum clearance of 16 inches from the ground.
We'll give
table
you a
says-
class.
Table says you can be 6 feet
Not if it's wildlife friendly,
inside and rear yards for domestic fences. Height, I don't know.
but domestic fences have to be wildlife friendly within 10 feet. And to be wildlife friendly, they have to comply with this clause. So that limits their height in certain locations to 4 feet.
I really think you need to put that particular piece of information into the height table.
So what is the change exactly?
I propose that for,
Go to the height section.
yeah, so
Okay,
if we
let's
look at the
bit-
height bullet, put the second bullet point, maybe in the table.
Oh, table.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to see it. If we were to add onto that second bullet, 4 feet in front yards and 6 feet inside and rear yards for domestic fences, except where wildlife friendly fences are required.
Aren't you requiring all everywhere?
No.
This is the 1 acre column.
Once you get 10 feet in from the property line, you could build a 6-foot fence.
And it is completely replicated at the 2+ acres. It's just then it's 20 feet instead of 10 feet. Let's not forget that. Okay.
Just to clarify, Rebecca, are you looking at the table when it's, I want to make sure that we're actually in the same area of discussion. So on Appendix A, the very first table, 1 acre district, you go down to height. Is that right there? Okay, just to make sure we're all looking at the same thing,
No, we
because she's right. It, exactly.
A side or a rear yard in these districts is 20 feet. So there are locations in the side and rear yard where you could build a 6-foot fence.
But it's contradictory as written because it says you can put up a 6-foot side and rear yard fence. It doesn't say if it's beyond 10 feet from the property line. That's your point, right?
Right, so
Am I
that's-
understanding your point correctly, Rebecca?
That's why I was proposing.
That's why she's proposing. That's your definition. That's not the definition of the town, you got to look at the definition. Yes.
No, no.
The town's definition. Yeah. Yeah, so do we have can we, it doesn't matter if we're repetitive. So to clarify that, how would we say this?
my starting point suggestion was to say 6 feet allowed, except where wildlife friendly fences are required.
Okay. And then when you read this, if you need to know more to understand, then you go and look where it says, where are wildlife friendly fences required? I mean, it's, if it were easy, it wouldn't be an ordinance. Yes. That's what it says.
I think because there are other elements that make a fence wildlife friendly, the clearance from the ground, I hesitate to simplify it down to the 4-foot height in this one table. I prefer a mention.
The distance, yeah.
Okay, so I added, I don't know if this is what you want. So in the row that is height, the second bullet point in the center column would say 4 foot in front yards and 6 feet in side yard and rear yards for domestic fences, except where fences must be wildlife friendly.
Okay. You want to finish with the definitions?
You have another,
Well, yeah, we have one further back on page 5, number 6, where we defined a little bit more the double fencing. In double fencing, where 2 or more fences are placed parallel to one. Say again? No, it's still there.
no,
No, no. If you
The-
go to
the
page
def-
5.6, it's there.
the parentheticals there were already in the ordinance, is that right? Where 2 or more fences,
We just crossed out must be located within the, that's what we crossed out. Yeah. But that's what the definition is. It's a change. So we're going through all the changes. And I think that's it. Okay. Yes. So page 5, if you go to page
Under location.
under 6, under location. Okay. Yeah. Is there anybody who wants double fencing? Then we just move on.
Well, I just want to be clear that anybody who, for example, has an existing property, now we're saying if you want to replace your fence, you have to move it 10 feet in, can only be 4 feet high, and you've got a dog and you want to be able to keep the dog in. And there are many people who have dogs who believe it's appropriate to keep them in a fenced enclosed area. Now we're saying you can't have double fencing. What does that mean? You've got your wildlife friendly fencing 10 feet in, within the 10 feet, and then you are going to put a second
Well,
fence
Teresa,
in. So
yeah.
I'm just questioning.
I understand.
If when we're saying double fencing, I understand what that means because I've seen it. The fences are usually spaced about 2 feet or maybe
Up
3
to
feet
6.
apart. You're not referring to the instance where someone has a fence on the property line and then they put a second fence 10 feet in. That's not double fencing. So I'm just wondering if, because that's what's going to happen. Is
I
people are-
think it's highly unlikely that somebody has a 4-foot fence on the property line and then 10-foot fence and feed in a 6-foot fence. Why would anybody do this?
I'd do it in a heartbeat if I was trying to comply with this and I wanted to keep my dog from being eaten by coyotes. I would put in a dog run fence. I have over an acre. I have to comply with this. So I
A
would.
dog run is not a double fence, Teresa.
What I'm trying to say, Marianne, is it is, if you don't indicate that what you're referring to here as double fencing, I know what we're talking about. I've seen it. But there are other folks who maybe wouldn't understand that two fences does not necessarily mean double fencing.
Can you suggest an edit to clarify? We
Oh,
wanted to
I'm
keep
just
everything
wondering if there is a simple way of saying double fencing, those fences that are approximately in close proximity or something like
So,
that,
I think that.
not permitted.
The
And I
double
don't,
fencing so is clearly directed towards keeping deers out. That's the only reason you do double fencing,
Exactly.
because they can't jump like a horse can't jump certain. So we can put that in. double
And that's what
fence,
that's
double
what it says. That's the definition
That's what it
as
says.
written. That's what it says. Double fencing where two or more fences are placed parallel to one another for the purpose of deferring deer or other animals.
It says it.
Do we need, but I understand what you're saying. Might somebody who wants a dog run think that they can't put in a dog run? Do we need to add language that says something about a dog
Well,
runs?
I
okay?
think they have to get a fence permit. And it would be easy to discuss that at the town. What is it they're trying to do? We can't sort of,
But if we write an ordinance says that they can't have a double fence and somebody interprets that as meaning you can't have the kind of a fence that makes a dog run, then they're out of luck.
but why would they think so? Because they're not doing it to keep the deer out. So it's not going to be,
I think we're gonna need something like frequently asked questions.
yeah, we could do that. Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
There are gonna be a
Yeah,
lot.
there will be questions.
It's very
Yeah, I
hard.
think
We need
yes,
diagrams, we need
diagrams.
illustrations, and we need.
Yeah. So we will, what we will have is a supporting document like we have for other things.
It's
Like we have for the fire ordinance is a good example.
Fence ordinance, or fensible space ordinance.
The defensible space ordinance.
Guidelines.
Yeah, yeah. It's, the defensible space is so difficult to understand. That's why they put in, there's a word for it. Guidelines. So, but the guidelines are not the ordinance. So the guidelines are easy to do and to address then, to make it clear for people that they understand. Okay. All right. So then we're through with the definitions.
Page 7 has some more green. Says wildlife, that wildlife friendly shall comply, so I don't think. And then Megan already mentioned the very last change on page 8. When a fence permit application demonstrates an alternative means of providing equal or better porosity to wildlife, the ASCC may grant relief to wildlife friendly requirements along a side or rear property line or some portion thereof. So I think it's important that everybody see that that's there and that's there to meet some of the objections that have been raised and to try to add some flexibility to it for people who would be unduly harmed by it. Maybe some wiggle room.
Okay. Have we exhausted our, so can I hear a motion?
We've exhausted reading through. Have we exhausted discussion?
For, I'm
Motion
sorry,
to-
where are we? Where are we?
We finished reading everything that changes.
Right.
Now the question is, now do we have discussion?
Oh, sorry, we have discussion. Sorry, we have
And is there
discussion.
anybody else? who
Okay,
wants to
discussion.
in-
Let me see if there is, sorry, I'm sorry. I got ahead of
I'm
mine.
gonna stop sharing.
So
we-
stop sharing so I
people
can
want
see
it
all the
fast.
people. I need this to go away from the screen.
He's trying.
I did it. Okay, nope. So there's, discussion.
Okay, I'm still stuck on the horse fence business because we are using the term to mean two very separate things. And I am very uncomfortable that we're saying all horse fences from heretofore in Portola Valley have to be 16 inches off the ground, blah, blah, blah. We are, because we don't, when we define a horse fence, we just define it as a horse fence, et cetera. So I still say that there is potential for confusion, that I understand what we're talking about is the nice horse fence appearing barrier. And in some instances, it indeed is intended to keep equines within a corral. But I'm just reading the definitions.
Not all only horse fences that are in the 0 to 10 or 0 to 20 zone. Your horse fence,
Again, Marianne, I understand
Okay.
that's what you're saying, but I'm just
I'm just
looking,
correcting.
I'm just looking literally at this, which I believe is the ordinance. Horse fence is a fence that complies with the horse fence standards set forth in 1843-60. Okay. Horse fences are wildlife friendly if they comply with 1804-315. Okay, so 1843-60.
So there are two kinds of horse fences.
That's all I'm saying.
That's right. There are now two kinds of horse fences. If people want to call their fence a horse fence, they can have their traditional horse fence, but they can't have it within 10 feet of the property line if they're on a 1 acre place, or 20 feet of the property line if they're on a 2 acre place. In that case, they can still have a horse fence, but it has to be wildlife friendly. And same thing, that the inelegance of that comes because we needed to work within the framework of what was already there and the way it was laid out.
So I do want to point out that I'm reading this and it says, in districts requiring a minimum parcel area of 1 acre, domestic fences or horse fences are allowed in required yards, including along property lines, except that a domestic fence in a front yard, blah, blah, blah. Domestic and horse fences must be wildlife friendly within 10 feet of property lines in side and rear yards. It's confusing. Never mind, it's just hopeless. It's just hopeless.
I think that some of the frustration is going back to the fact that the ordinance is really confusing. We had some interesting meetings, to say the least. I mean, I think we're all open to continuing to polish the language, but we need the help at this point to understand where that should happen.
Are you ready for a possible motion?
No, we're still discussing.
Teresa, is your issue the difference between corral fencing?
I think
and a-
so, yeah.
My issue is that the ordinance uses a style with a term that actually means something. And in actual fact, when you go around town, a substantial portion of horse fencing that you see, there are no horses anywhere near. It could be horse property, but for most of the time it's been taken out as a horse property. But when someone new comes in and they want to put in a stable and they want to put in, they want to encourage or keep that character of our town around, then they are putting in a horse fence intended to keep their horse on their property. And that's where I'm getting, it's the fact that it was written in a kind of, I'll just say sloppy way, probably 60 years ago when this first was drafted, because everybody had horses and that's all everybody was thinking about. Nobody ever considered that it might actually evolve the way our town has and change. It has, that's what it is.
I'm
Yeah.
not understanding what we're calling a horse fence is the 3 pieces of wood plus the mesh.
No, you're not allowed to have mesh, according to this.
But the 3 pieces of wood, 4 feet tall, is that adequate to keep horses in?
You
or-
can have mesh.
It's not about the
In the
the
10
4
feet.
feet tall. It's about the 16 inches off the ground. that's where I kind of get stuck. And I understand about wanting to have wildlife friendly fencing. And I also personally have seen when mama deer has come through my own backyard and she comes through the corral and she doesn't really have much trouble. And baby goes between. They don't go under, they go right between. That's the way they do. In my yard with my guys, you know, sometimes they boing over, but they don't tend to go under in our yard. But I don't have my fences 16 feet, 60 feet. Oh my word, that'd be a big horse, 16 inches off the ground. It's just the terminology. And then there's only one other, and I promise this is the last thing. We don't say anything about the situation. Judy, you brought up about, you know, properties being subdivided, having multiple units put on, ADUs put on, et cetera. We have no say on the ADUs. They can put that ADU, they could physically
Absolutely.
put the structure 3 feet from the property line. And no, I was corrected. It's 3 if they have the right fire retardant building code. Robert corrected me at a meeting earlier last week on that. I thought it was 4 feet as well, but
Whatever.
it doesn't matter.
That, we have no say on that. So
I
then it will
understand.
just-
And so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering,
That goes into the guidelines again, you know,
Okay.
draw something. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so any more discussion? Does it?
Yes, I would like to request a clarification from, a response from everyone on the committee, which is to take this back out of the nitpicky language of an ordinance, you know, to take it away from the question of grandfathering and specific problematic properties and nuance. Does everyone on the committee agree with the spirit of the changes that we are working on? Have we stayed, you know, on course with what our committee was tasked with doing? And is this change in the spirit of what the Conservation Committee should be doing to preserve ferocity for wildlife? I just want to make sure that we're all at least meeting, you know, where are we getting lost? Is it in the nitty gritty details, or are we off course on a bigger?
I think that will come out when we vote. So why would we say that individually now? If we are in that spirit, because if one has a concern about the approach,
Well, because I think that there are concerns about the details. For example, Teresa has expressed support for the spirit of what we're trying to do, but has problems with what we've managed to achieve so far. So I guess I'm just trying to zoom back out and see if there are other like major issues with the committee pursuing this change before we start voting to move it forward.
I think maybe Megan's asking that question because if you don't like the overall attempt to go where we think we're trying to go, then you're never going to be happy with the language and we'll never get to satisfaction. So it's helpful to know if there are people who really just think this is a totally wild ass thing we shouldn't even be doing.
I think that would still come out in the vote. I mean, we don't, Marianne said we don't have to vote unanimously all the time. I personally understand that and largely in favor. Where I will have my concerns is if it's limiting the homeowner rights too much from our committee perspective, and whether that should not be something that should come from the town council, redelegated to us or discussed in a different way, because currently, as we know, within California, there are a lot of restrictions put on homeowners and what they can do and can't do. And this can be viewed as one where we have a good intention, but it limits people even more so when they move.
But Yogi, you live in the ranch where the limitation is extraordinary compared to
much
this.
bigger.
Oh, exactly. So this is, you know,
You don't
draconian
know
compared
how
to the ranch.
how many
But-
complaints are these days in HOAs.
I know.
It's with legal fights and everything. So it's really under pressure. Any new addition, and we haven't even started the home hardening and 0 to 5 zone thing, which will now be mandatory.
I think one important thing which might have gotten lost over the last 3 months is to look again at the whole picture. And that is, if you look at the 2+ acre districts, we are making no change. So at the 2+ acre districts, somebody before us has said, this has to be back 20 feet on 3 sides, 50 feet on the front. Somebody has said that. That has given a sort of a similar situation like what we are saying at 1 to 2 acres, you're going back 10 feet. So this is not new. And the Westridge, or the 2+ acre, is well received. There wasn't a, whatever, whatever you call it. So we are not
Haven't
doing.
taken it to, I mean, if we're trying to get more buy-in from the public, that would be something to consider, would be to take it to Westridge.
It's a size.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what are you saying? I don't understand what you're saying.
Saying, if Teresa's suggesting that we haven't had enough public input, the only other way I can think of to have input beside public meetings, a meeting with the ASCC, study session would be, do you take it in group and see what they think about it?
We are making no
I
changes, so
know,
why
but
would we
what
take it?
But if they, well, and in theory.
We're not
I don't
making
know
no
whether you could
changes.
Subdivide up there. Westridge, I mean, that's the part of town that's at risk of changing the most, actually. If they can keep the state laws away, they're okay, but those parcels in the next 5 to 10 years may well be
Mhm.
subdivided.
And then we get to habitat.
So then we, unless we have these kinds of restrictions,
Right.
we lose these corridors. And especially because now there are ADUs. So there are going to be these pinch points coming in all over town. So we can get this established before there are too many of those. They will continue to pinch where they pinch because we have no control of that. But we can keep the other places with some passage so that we
And
have a
We are the
chance.
conservation committee. Okay. And that's why it has to go to the ASCC next.
No, then why don't we then put a motion forward? and
Yeah,
just
that's what-
vote? We-
that's
we
right.
Don't have to
Okay, let me
pass
ask you,
it to the end.
is somebody who wants to make a motion that we move on approving what we have so that we can go and present this to ASCC? Recommend to ASCC. Is there a motion? Is there somebody here who wants to start that motion?
I can make the motion, although I was on the subcommittee. I don't know whether that's an
You can
issue or
still make
not.
a motion. I
I make a
just,
motion that we take the proposed changes to the fencing ordinance as adapted tonight and corrected tonight, that we approve them as written tonight with an eye to taking them to ASCC, presenting to them for their feedback and changes and moving forward with it as they see fit.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, then let's vote. All in favor?
Should we need to do a roll call if it's not
Oh, roll call.
unanimous?
Teresa?
Opposed?
Nona?
Yes, in favor.
Yogi?
Abstain.
I'm
Judy?
sorry. Nancy?
Yeah.
Judy, yes. Nancy?
Abstain?
Megan?
Yes.
Dieter?
Yes.
Marianne, yes. What does that count to? I didn't do the counting. 5 to 4, motion carries. 5 to 1, I'm sorry, 5 to 1 with 2 abstentions. So motion carries. Okay. I'm glad I didn't put much on the agenda other than that. All right. So let's continue. Tip of the month. Do we have a tip of the month? Oh, yes, we were going to do the bird, as nesting season is over, we're going to recommend that people do their tree trimming, okay? And then what's blooming now? What's blooming now?
California fuchsia, so
California fuchsia, should we do that?
What?
California Fuchsia, okay. All right. Kudos, okay, no kudos.
See, I have a suggestion. I would like to suggest that we give the job of kudos to our student member who can do that on her own time, early in the morning, late at night from a distance.
Yes,
And that we either pass the suggestion on to her or let her choose with, and coming back to you
Okay.
for approval.
okay.
We do that?
Yeah, that would be nice. That's a very nice idea. Okay. And then the owl, F is not, it's just there, so I don't forget. The owl box placement article is basically almost done. We are planning, you know, we did it last month and there was the issue with one thing to clarify. So we're going to plan to have that article in the newsletter for the coming news. Okay. I think, should we defer, because this is just too much, all right? And then the wildlife inventory project, I was already going to defer. Let's quickly go through the town committees. Frog Pond,
Yeah, not much to report. Planning on having a walk around before the rainy season starts. And I think there's no second mowing necessary this year. So,
oh, that's interesting, okay.
of course, that it really didn't come back.
Okay,
And the center part can stay. I mean, that's fine.
okay, thank you. Open space,
Open space hasn't met since we.
Okay.
met last.
So let me just give a very brief report about the joint open space
yes, please.
Conservation Committee Subcommittee. We met at Frog Pond, just we're meeting in different places. Nona, Gary Nielsen, me met for that meeting. And the things we talked about and decided were, there's been some talk at the council level evidently about coalescing various committees, decreasing the number of committees. And we think it's very important that these two committees remain separate. That open space is a big picture strategic, managing the open space fund, and that conservation is more operational and hands-on with land management functions and permits and site visits and education, et cetera. That those appeal to two different kinds of people, the two different kinds of potential volunteer members. Somebody might be very interested in open space stuff. The last thing they would want to do is, you know, pick up loppers and come out with trees and need to spring down. So we,
Chainsaw.
yeah, we want to make that clear through Rebecca, that when that issue comes up, we think they're, I can see that someone who doesn't know a whole lot about what they each do would say, oh, why don't you just combine those two? But they're very different. The standing subcommittee will ensure that there's close coordination between the two committees on the areas where that's needed, that the flow of information and decision between the two committees will be maintained as it is at present. That is, the conservation subcommittees focused on each important town property will continue to analyze and recommend and make recommendations. The conservation committee as a whole will approve those or change them as they see fit. The request will then go to the subcommittee for oversight and approval because they have the purse strings. And then they'll go to open space as a whole. And then that request, as worked out between the two, will then go to the town engineer or public works. And if small things that have already been sort of approved in general, then the work will be done. And that the larger issue of what's going to get budgeted and how much money is going to come out of the open space fund, that process really needs to start like at the conservation committee level in February, so that each of the subcommittees that deals with an important town-owned property should be prepared to come to the February meeting with their analysis and recommendations. So there's time for all those steps to happen, and then we can get it into the town engineer to estimate cost, put in budget plans, line things out that he can't afford to do, et cetera, and get that in time for the town's budget process. So it'll take a couple of months. There was concern that OS funding be used for maintenance only of town open spaces, which is what the agreement with the council was, and not for trail work, not for right-of-way work, not for town center, which is in fact not an open space. And there's an obvious need for accurate accounting of those expenses. Currently, there's no accounting back to what's being charged to the open space fund. So I was tasked with speaking with Craig because he was liaison to finance, we thought. And he said that he supported in general the idea that there should be accurate accounting, but he was not at all supportive of like monthly quibbling over individual items in the warrant list. He thought it would take up far more time than it would be justified. He suggested requesting a quarterly report kind of a thing. And I think our point was just that earlier in the counting game, once those funds are spent, just in the memo line needs to be put, or however the accountant chooses to do it, needs to be put UUT funds, or open space. There needs to be one phrase chosen so that you could generate a report quite easily from your computer so that there would be accurate reporting. It shouldn't be a great big deal that takes somebody a lot of time to do.
Yeah, the town can easily generate reporting of the use of the open space fund. They do that already.
Yeah,
So-
that's a
But they don't,
function.
but they don't
But
feed
how
it
often
back to open space. Yeah, I mean, quarterly.
to open space?
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah, okay.
evidently it doesn't go back to open space.
It
They've
hasn't.
not seen any accounting.
Well, any accounting system goes monthly, so
There's-
accounting systems go monthly, so that
Right,
should be
right.
easy to have it
Yeah, but,
monthly.
we don't want to add an unnecessary burden to them. We don't want to say, give us a monthly report if a monthly report.
No, we would just
what we
ask for
want,
it in
But
case.
quarterly, every 6 months, so that somebody's line iteming them properly. And there is a complexity to it, and that is that some of it's probably being spent to pay public works employees to do some of these things. So then they're not line item expenses. They're just coming out of that. So there is a complexity that I wouldn't even begin to propose how it gets solved, but the accountant should know how to do that and should be able to do it. What we're
There's-
worried about is creep, that suddenly here are these funds. It's like, oh, these are open space funds. Well, that trail needs something, and it's kind of, that it's.
Well, Judy,
There's one modification that affects this committee, though. So Betsy and I met with the town manager today just to have our introductory meeting. And she actually brought up the question of the UUT fund that's applied to open space maintenance. She needs that budget by February, which means that we have to start the process by November to make sure that it goes through the committees and they can work it into the budget. So everybody who's in charge of, monitoring an open space, you need to have an idea by really in the next month or so, what we need to think about.
yeah, I thought it has to be earlier than February. And the other thing, just quickly, because it fits in, we're going to have a December meeting this time because we're not doing the second, it's not going to go into Christmas. And even if it would go into Christmas, we could have a special meeting. So the times that we don't have a December meeting, they're over. So we will be working on that. That goes hand in hand.
Okay.
Okay, Judy, that's it.
That's it.
Thank you. Public Works, Judy and I are meeting with Darcy and Robert next week. We have an appointment and we'll discuss where we can help. Trails and Path, Teresa?
I did give the update at the Trails and Paths meeting that we've had the discussion about the parklet for Shady Trail. And it was very appreciated that that is moving forward and has been included. So they said, thank you very much.
Okay.
Would that be something that would be funded by open space fund?
Okay, wildfire, I have already addressed at the under committee meeting, the changes. ASCC, the Monday ASCC meeting was canceled, so there is no update. I don't think any one of us has the bandwidth to go into the new business with the oak trees, unless I'm wrong.
Given that our next meeting is in less than 2 weeks, I might suggest we defer that
Okay.
to the next meeting if that is acceptable.
Yeah.
Wait, our next meeting is less than
Judy, it's at the bottom of
It's
the agenda.
7th.
I'd have a comment that I'd like to make if we're done with the agenda item.
Okay, so I'm away on October 7th, so just know that I'm not here.
Hang on. So can I go back? 8A, are we in agreement that we're jumping over 8A? That's my first question. Oh, 6A, sorry, 6A. Thank you, 6A. Okay, all right.
That gives everybody time to really read through the thing that Peter's written. And
Yeah, so read through it, and so we're going to work on it at the next meeting. Now I'm going to item 7, the template C, right? that was attached. So you're right, and just use that in the future.
No, before we do that, I want to propose a change to this.
Oh, you had a change. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I think that this is Appendix C. In the bold thing, I think that it says proposed landscape plan and then describe what is proposed plant list. Oh, it was near the end. Was it the last attachment on the agenda?
From the email, yeah, it wasn't an email today.
No, not in today's email. It was in the,
It's the Conservation Committee comments. That's what you're talking about.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That is the new proposed short version outline for us to follow when we write site reviews now.
No, that's not the outline. That's the template.
It's the template for the report,
Yes.
the outline that we use. when we
Okay,
write
that's what you
the
use outline for. Okay, it's
Template.
the template. Yeah.
Template's a better word. There still is that longer version around that guides you and you can cut and paste language into it, et cetera. But what my proposal is under proposed landscape plan, which is bolded, describe what is proposed. Absolutely, yes. But then it says plant list in parentheses. And I think that you need another bold.
Okay,
It says proposed plant list. I think the plant list is worthy of discussion in and of itself. It's not, there are things to say about the landscape plan, the density, the location.
okay, I get you.
Et cetera,
Yeah,
et cetera,
okay.
Much, et cetera.
So why don't we put plant list in bold right above native areas? Would that work? Would that work?
Okay,
Or
or right above fencing wildlife porosity, because then native areas and the arborist reports can all go into proposed landscape plan.
wouldn't the arborist report and the plant list be on the same indentation?
That would be okay with me.
Okay, so then why don't we put it in front of arborist report or behind arborist report? I don't really care.
Okay.
Oh.
Any one of those.
Okay, let's,
I think it needs to be a heading in
Yeah,
and of itself.
that's perfect. Okay, plant list. And then I will make another iteration and I'll send it out to everybody. Thank you. That's
you.
very good. And I'll cross out plant list up there. That's a good point. Okay. Let me just see. So we're not going, because we never do, we're not going to go through the site permits. I just want to thank everybody. We had this horrific number of site reports last month, and everybody pulled through. We got enough people for subcommittees, so I want to thank you. I have a spreadsheet. Judy gave me the template that actually shows who is a leader, and who has been a member. And I will be updating this with the last few that came in the last 4 weeks. And then I'll send it to everybody because some people are doing tremendously more than other people. And I think we should thank those people. So I'll put out the spreadsheet. Okay, then the tree permits. I just, we're not going through them, but I have one comment. You remember the tree removal process? We worked for months. And I had met to put this on the website. That was a month ago, and it is not yet on the website. So I sent an email today to planning, actually, to ask if this is held up somewhere.
Didn't it have to get approved by somebody before going on the website?
That's why I reached out to planning. Yeah. I just wanted you to know. Yes. So now we are,
Okay. So, I wanted to let everybody in this group know that I am resigning from this committee effective now. And, I've actually been attending meetings for 2 years in August. Amazing. I have enjoyed the site visits that I've attended, except for maybe one. And in general, I've learned, quite a bit about what the Conservation Committee does. And I think it's valuable work. But I feel like my time would be better spent in an organization with slightly different leadership and different goals. I feel like the public meeting goal is to educate the public on what the Conservation Committee is about and to vote expeditiously on the subcommittee work. And, you know, we spend a lot of time, you know, sort of arguing amongst ourselves and trying to, I don't know, maybe just explain to each other what our thinking is. And I just feel like my time would be better spent in a more efficacious, different way of interacting with the public.
well, we thank you
So
for
I
the years.
appreciate the time I have spent, but I am leaving the Conservation Committee. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Can I have a preliminary show of hands who can make it on the 7th of October? Yeah, you can't? Oh, yeah.
Just so you know, I cannot make the time that you all selected to change the meetings.
I thought you resigned, you resigned. I'm confused.
So
Oh,
it's
okay,
not an issue anyway, so.
okay,
But I couldn't have made it anyway.
okay. So can I have a show of hands? Do we have a quorum? Okay, so we have a quorum. Okay. All right, and with that, we adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.